Hey there. Welcome back to these conversations with no one, where I attempt to share my experience living in a state of non-identification with my character and duality. It's been a while since I made a conversation for the main conversation. So it's kind of ironic it's happening right after my last video, which was talking about how I wasn't sure when I'd have another thought to make another video. But the subject of unconditional love crossed my path a few times recently in ways that made me consider what it is and how we talk about it. I've spoken about it quite a few times in other conversations, as well as how my paradigm shift occurred as a result of realizing unconditional love from a place of non-ego. So some of this might just be me repeating myself or stating the same things in different ways. But from some of the things I've been reading and hearing, some thoughts have come together in a new way, so I figured I'd put them together here. First of all, I can really appreciate that the concept of unconditional love is a really hard one to grasp, especially when identifying with duality and believing in your character. It seems impossible, an impossible standard to achieve, and it's easy to believe it doesn't really exist outside of woo-woo, make-believe fantasy worlds. But for those who do believe it can be achieved within duality, there are quite a few authors and speakers who teach ways to practice loving unconditionally. And those who follow these practices do seem to be able to open their hearts and become much more loving people. But realizing unconditional love completely seems to still be a challenge for people following that path. One of the most common questions when studying these practices is how to unconditionally love someone while simultaneously not being a doormat for those who would cause us emotional harm. And within that paradigm, the answer usually has to do with setting healthy boundaries or removing yourself from those connections. And yeah, that's excellent advice, very valid within the paradigm. But what it made me realize is that my shift based on unconditional love seems to be a different sort of experience, and definitely comes from a completely different paradigm. I never tried to learn how to love unconditionally. I did sort of the normal self-improvement work over my life, trying to learn how to love better, how to learn how to be a better partner, how to learn how to be a better man. But when my paradigm shift happened, I simply stopped believing in conditional love. So it wasn't adding a new sense of love, not expanding my heart 3 sizes, 3 sizes that day, like the Grinch. It wasn't a feeling of overwhelming love for everyone and everything. I just stopped taking everything personally. And what I actually felt, besides the absence of conditional love, was absolute forgiveness of myself and everyone else for being messy, complex, irrational human beings doing the best we can while experiencing a very chaotic and confusing version of reality. So now when I interact with the world, my love for other people isn't a feeling of love. It's not an emotional love. It's a lack of judgment or comparison. There is no hierarchy between me and anybody else that I meet, no scales of better or worse, just different experiences. It's honoring every single person's path through this experience and honoring the validity of every variation of experience being expressed by consciousness. And it seems to me that there is no goal of raising every single person's consciousness to the same level or waking up the entire world, because it seems to me that we need people who experience this reality at all different layers. We need the complexity and diversity. Otherwise, the experience would become a little monochrome. But from this perspective now, no one can emotionally harm me without my participation. I don't need anyone to respect me, and I don't worry when others are disrespectful to me, because that's not actually happening to me. It's simply a matter of, some people appreciating me for how they perceive me and others rejecting me. And their perception of me and how they treat me comes down to how closely our paradigms align with each other and how each of us react to unfamiliar paradigms. And I understand why other people react in fear and anger when they don't understand something, when it's unfamiliar. And when there's fear, there'll be conflict. So instead, I just feel a little sorry for those who suffer so greatly from all their fears. They feel compelled to project it onto themselves and other people. Just like I also have tremendous empathy and sympathy for those affected by the horrendous emotional abuse that comes from that behavior. But I can't blame them or take it personally just because I'm not experiencing their reality. And it's not a matter of would've, should've, could've. It's a matter of this is what is. This is what they're experiencing. Now, even with all of that, I'm not saying I wouldn't have hard boundaries when the situation requires it. Unconditional love for me does not replace appropriate action. Forgiveness and depersonalization doesn't mean allowing one person to victimize or terrorize another. If I ever again encounter a situation that I'm forced to confront head on, then I have no problem taking what actions are necessary to keep myself and others safe. But from my perspective, everyone involved in a situation like that is a victim of the illusion of duality that we're all indoctrinated into. And I can't blame anyone, and my instinct is to want to help them instead of punish them. I read about tribes, and I wish I had some citations here for the articles. Some of you might be familiar with them. Tribes treat crime and mental illness with a sincere desire to help heal the individuals who are harming themselves and others. And or also they accept those who are simply different, whose brains work differently, whose realities are different. And they do that. They treat these individuals without stigma or punishment. And those people often flourish and stay integrated with their community. And for me, this is what unconditional love looks like when it's part of a culture. No member of the community is better or worse. Some might be struggling in some places more than others. Some might be having a bad reaction to one thing or another, or feel compelled to do something. But that doesn't mean the person is a bad person and needs to be punished, unless, they can't be controlled and they're actually physically harming people over and over. There are limits to even this sort of acceptance, but when no one in the community is better or worse than each other, they're a diverse collection of things they can offer. I mean, everyone's a collection of things they can offer and things that they need. Things they excel at and things they're really not prepared to do. The shift in perspective means the people in those communities don't need to think or feel any particular way about each other, because they're not labeling them as other. So for me, unconditional love isn't about sympathy or empathy, as that implies other. We're all one, part of one thing, one consciousness, and I still feel sympathetic and empathetic when interacting with the world. That's a character experience and absolutely valid and valuable in its own right. I just don't see that as part of unconditional love. So, let me know. I'm interested in what your perspective is or experience with this. And for those who wish to talk to me outside of YouTube, my email address is in the description below. I've had a few emails now, and they've inspired me to make a couple more videos, so stay tuned. Thanks for listening.